end of chapter 2. So it seems that Miriam Bell is the inception of everything that's going wrong. For the secret ending of the chapter 2 prologue, if after leaving the basement demon fight, John walks out of the church and all the way back to the cornfield with his crashed car from the beginning of the prologue, he will see that now the Scarecrow is surrounded by a series of demonic symbols. If John exorcises the Scarecrow and then walks up to it, he'll see that its face is now an open hole. Again, more of that imagery of this demonic cult causing people's faces to just be like a pit of sorts. Specifically, the eyes of the Scarecrow will now glow red, or where the eyes should be. If you'll remember that last note we found in the prologue, glow red, just be like of that arrow, and then walks up to it, he'll see that its face is now an open hole. Faces to just be, or where the eyes should be. If you'll remember that last note we found in the prologue about the effigy of the accursed and whatnot, it says that after being purified, the eyes will glow red, and then it says to enter the unseen world, destroy the effigy with fire. So if John walks back to where his car was at the beginning of the prologue, the car is now on fire. John sets himself on fire and then quickly sprints to the Scarecrow, lighting it on fire as well. As the Scarecrow burns, the twins will appear at the top of the cornfield, and an additional 9 children will walk out from the sides of the corn and stand around the burning John and the burning Scarecrow. Suddenly the screen will cut and John will once again be transformed into this spider creature surrounded by several stick effigies. He'll walk through fields of these creatures until eventually he finds Miriam Bell. Upon approaching her, she will turn and scream at John before once again we start back with Father Garcia at the normal beginning of chapter 2. Beginning screamingly 2. So what does this ending do? They both pick up with chapter 2 as normal, and it's all a dream, so the events of what happens to John doesn't really matter, right? It's just the things that he's witnessing that matters. This is real history and characters he's witnessing that he normally wouldn't be privy to while he's awake, but again, this dream is a sort of vision. So what is the significance of this alternate ending? Well, in the normal ending, Miriam Bell appears, says, "Here I am," and then "my little ones." Whereas here we have John lighting himself on fire, and then a Scarecrow on fire, and then becoming the spider thing, and Miriam screams in the camera's face. I think the most important detail about this alternate ending is that scene of the children appearing out of the corn as the Scarecrow is burning. We have the twins, who have been very elusive up to this point, appear, but then 9 other kids. If you'll remember, 6 children died at the church in the 1930s, 4 more died in the 1950s, and then the 2 twins were dragged into the basement, supposedly also being killed, which adds up to 12 kids in total. So then why, as the Scarecrow is burning, do only 11 children show up? More on that in a bit. But now we're done with all of chapter 2, and it's filled in a lot of gaps. Miriam Bell seemed to kick all of this off. When she was at the church back in the 30s, she probably caused the demon in the corn to appear, that killed the dog, that killed the 6 kids, that killed the 4 other kids, and then, or at least it probably killed the 4 other kids, or she killed the 4 other kids, doesn't really matter, and then she dragged the 2 kids into the basement, supposedly killing them. She is killed the 4 other kids, doesn't really matter, and then she dragged the 2 kids into the basement, supposedly killing them. She is our first event in the timeline. All of this begins with her act of evil and her act of devotion to Satan. And then from there, we can start to put together in our heads how the rest of it played out. In the 1950s, the church was shut down, again because of Miriam Bell, led to things like the death of Father Clark. It led to a lot of superstition arising in the town, and then from the notes that we saw from the thralls or ghosts that we killed at the beginning of chapter 2, we see that the demonic cult suddenly gained a lot of influence in the last 30 years. Either under the command or the command of the spirit of Miriam Bell, they are inducting new members into their cult daily. And from what little aspects we see of the cult, they're not exactly a charity organization, between animal sacrifices and cutting people's faces open, or at least making holes appear in people's head. Not a lot of clarification on that yet, but we'll get there. But Miriam Bell seems to be the start of all of it. So that begs the question, who's Gary? Because we hear Gary mentioned a lot. When we boot up the game itself, we see the message, "Gary loves you." So what does Gary have to do with Miriam Bell, and why is every other note we read supposedly written by this figure named Gary, if Bell's the one in charge? These are all questions to ask ourselves as we move towards chapter 3. The other thing I want to mention is the Spindly Lady herself. So at the beginning of chapter 2, we have a setup as to what a lot of these ghosts or demons that we are fighting are. They were previously people in a past life or before they gave themselves over to demonic influence. While in the tombs, we had the boy who wanted to talk to his grandfather, the man who wanted more power, and the woman who had a miscarriage. And as mentioned, each of those ghosts correlate to their fighting style and appearance. The woman with the miscarriage is very gross, considering the tail for YouTube, but very creepy. I love weird Silent Hill-esque monster designs like that. But nevertheless, we see that these demons were previously people. Well, remember how there's that quick mention in the notes from the investigator that when the woman went missing, which we can assume to be Miriam Bell, an old nun died? Well, initially, I thought that was referring to Miriam Bell herself. I thought she was the old nun, but that doesn't really make a lot of sense. For one, she could still be alive in the 1980s, or that might be her ghost or something, who knows. But when we see Miriam Bell, she is not the same form of the Spindly Lady that we fight in chapter 2. I think that this old nun that died was someone that either willingly joined Miriam's side, or maybe Miriam effectively sold their soul or killed them in some kind of demonic sacrifice. Maybe Miriam used her blood and her body for the sacrifice that would lead to the death of the other children. And I think that this old nun became the Spindly Lady. My other evidence for that is that in the initial note you read that describes the Spindly Lady game, they mention an old nun from the 50s, so that's the phrase old nun used twice. But just like those victims that we fought in the cemetery, the old nun became the Spindly Lady who we fight within the church. Again, another example of this cult and demon's influence, and that it's causing a lot of people to die and suffer a lot. I believe that should be everything for chapter 2. The last thing I want to mention is in the note that John reads that devolves into a bunch of demons talking about how you can't kill the snake, John, and all that, you see the phrase pandemonium regnat mentioned over and over, and that's even something that a lot of the demons who the thralls that charge at you will say. Pandemonium regnat is Latin for chaos reigns. Chaos reigns is something that was seen in chapter 1 in one of the notes. It is something that several of the thralls will mention. So sometimes the thralls. So sometimes you'll see Pandemonium regnat or chaos reigns. It means the same thing. But for my Wendigoon fans, those who've kept up with the channel or just know literature, you'll remember that when we covered Paradise Lost, we learned that the word pandemonium came from John Milton as a Latin phrase to say all demons. And that from there, the word pandemonium was used as a synonym for chaos because the house of pandemonium in hell, as described in Paradise Lost, was this giant palace where they planned on how to take over the world. So in effect, chaos. So really, when you hear the phrase pandemonium regnat, it doesn't just mean chaos reigns, as is shown throughout the story, like with the thralls yelling it. It also means all demons reign, which is really a note to the cult's true intentions, to bring about the rule of demonic forces. And I believe that should be everything with chapter 2. So at this point, we have seen everything that led up to the demonic possessions that have occurred throughout the story. It makes sense as to how all of this affected Amy Martin, because Snake Meadow Hill Road, where the Martins lived, is related to Snake Meadow Hill Church. So Sister Miriam caused all this to take place, which eventually led up to John Ward in 1986 going to exorcise young Amy Martin. All of that went wrong. He was put in a psych ward. He tried again in 1987, and that went wrong as well. And chapter 2 ends with John Ward driving away, determined to save Jason and Nate Martin with the aid of Father Garcia, but the cult is hot on his trail, ready to stop him. And of course, at the end of all of this, the question, who's Gary? All of that will be revealed as we get into chapter 3. Now, in the previous sections, I've explained how the game normally goes, and then the alternate paths or secret endings you can take. However, chapter 3 is kind of defined by its secret ending, and also the chapter's sections themselves make the most sense if you do the secret steps as you're playing through it. So we're going to talk about the methods and path to get the secret ending on our first talk through. With that, chapter 3 begins with a flashback. That flashback is to September the 21st, 1986, which means now we're going back to the night that was mentioned in the notes from chapter 1. The first night that Father Ward and Father Alred went to perform an exorcism on the young Amy Martin. John seems afraid, but Alred assures him that if he just follows Alred's lead, everything will be fine. When they arrive to the house, we see this cutscene of Alred and Ward stepping into the house. I can't explain why, but for some reason I really like this cutscene. It goes to show how rotoscoping can be used effectively just to portray emotions, because John has this sense of fear or anger almost in his eyes, like he's ready for a fight, while Alred seems so peaceful and calming. Another thing to mention about the rotoscopes, and I'll throw some examples on screen now, but Erdorf used himself or his family for a lot of the reference models for how to draw the rotoscope scenes out. So a lot of these scenes are just Erdorf acting out the motion and then painting over it and translating it into the game. That doesn't really affect the story at all, but it was cool and I wanted to mention it. Similar to the notes from Chapter 1, as the Martins answer the door, Bob Martin says that he had to tie Amy up in the basement, and he clearly feels remorseful about it. John and Alred understand and begin to walk downstairs to see Amy. A few things to note if you don't immediately go downstairs to continue the story. If you walk to the fridge, you can see a drawing of 6 children. 6 kids, of course, being in reference to the missing children debacle. After going into the basement, Alred and John stand before Amy, and initially, Amy remains silent. At this, John awakes in bed. As you could imagine, the flashbacks to the Martin household were a part of his reoccurring nightmares. But at the same time, it also allows us to see exactly what happened on the night of September the 21st. The screen then tells us that it is 3 days till the Profane Sabbath. The Profane Sabbath is the thing Father Garcia mentioned in his note at the end of Chapter 2. And while we don't know what the Profane Sabbath is yet, it's probably bad and they should probably stop it. Upon waking up, we can find the letter from Molly and the letter from Garcia at the end of Chapter 2, but now we have another note from Father Garcia.
John, I can't find Aiden Jason Martin in the state foster care system. It's possible that, after what happened last year, they went to live with relatives. I will try to find out what I can. Meanwhile, go investigate the clinic where Amy worked. We must find the place where they intend to summon Malphas and disrupt their plans. Vaya con Dios. Father Garcia.
So Malphas is, once again, a very powerful demon in Christian and Judaism lore. And since John and Garcia have been unable to locate the twins, Garcia is now looking for them in the foster care system, informing John that he should go check out the clinic that Amy worked at. If you'll remember, all the way back in Chapter 1, we heard that Amy worked at a clinic and that her mother's religious friends weren't very happy about this. But we also saw in one of the non-canon endings that Amy was working at that clinic and being directly influenced by this Gary figure while she was there. So, as Garcia's deduced, perhaps the clinic has something to do with whatever's going on. Another thing I want to mention now is how in the first place did John and Garcia find each other, right? Because they've never met each other in person, again besides the wood thing, and all of Chapter 2 was a dream. Given that John was having dreams about Father Garcia and about the twins and Amy's possession and whatnot, it's safe to say that Garcia was also having dreams and visions about John. We'll find out later in Chapter 3 that the two of them have never actually met in person, but somehow they've come into contact. Keep that in mind, that somehow the two of them came to know each other, and now they're both pushing forward to the same goal. After walking out of John's house, we can get in the car and immediately travel to the clinic, or we could can walk down the street and look into the two houses next to John's house. One house has a small child watching the television, and the other house has a family sitting around the television. Depending on what's going on in the game or which day during Chapter 3 you check in on these windows, different things will happen. If you keep playing the game wrong, which we'll talk about in a minute, the scenes inside of the houses become progressively more demonic, but there's also some fun Easter eggs as to what's actually happening on the TV screens that again Airdorf and I talked about in our interview. Anyway, from leaving John's house we can get in the car and travel to the clinic. While walking around the street of downtown, the first thing that we'll notice is that the front door to the clinic is barred up with a police officer standing guard out front. The cop tells us that we're not allowed inside and better be on our way. While exploring the streets around the downtown, we'll see that the town itself is in a state of disrepair. Most of the buildings are boarded up and nearly everything's covered in graffiti. One rather ominous thing we can find is this image of a dead bird in an alley, and the bird's just there and dead, and we get to see it up close. For some reason, I guess. Also, while walking up and down the street, a truck will drive by that has a thrall in the driver's seat. This keeps in mind that the cult is always watching. After walking behind the clinic, we find an entryway in through a broken window. And from there, we can see what this clinic's about and why it's been recently shut down. Beginning with a note that we find near the front door of the clinic itself.
To Rhonda Eriks, from Gary Miller. Fax 081-785-002. Hi Rhonda, just a couple of reminders after last week's visit. Please keep your desk tidy. Our patients need to feel at ease with their healthcare experience. Remember our sales points. Clean, quick, courteous. Do not return any calls from the Department of Health before notifying me first or leaving a message with Tiffany. We cannot afford another surprise inspection. Please do call me on my direct personal line if you happen to hear back from Ms. Ma. And one more thing. Keep Jeffrey out of sight. Remember, Gary loves you.
This clinic is effectively a prenatal care clinic. In other words, it's a clinic that would help do things like monitor pregnancies, or provide supplements or vitamins or checkups or what have you, or deliver babies. And typically it would be a clinic like this that would also offer abortion options or pregnancy terminations, which would make sense why in Chapter 1, Amy's mother mentioned that her religious friends didn't like Amy working down at the clinic. So this would be the kind of clinic that would normally offer this kind of thing, and maybe they even advertise that they offer it. But as we're going to find out, they weren't doing a whole lot of that for one very not good reason. But for all we know now, this facility was effectively a pregnancy care clinic. And of course, the fact that that fax was written by Gary Miller. So whoever this Gary guy is, he owns a pregnancy care clinic for some reason. Like his day job's delivering babies, and in the night he just decides to lead a murder cult for funsies. Walking through the rest of the clinic, we can see again that it's an abandoned facility, but after exercising an IV drip, we get this note.
Note to self, pills do not dissolve in IV drip well. 2 week, patients waking up before process is complete. Sooner or later they will realize they are having the same hallucinations. Suggest concentrated, injectable version.
Now this has nothing to do with pregnancy, probably. This is someone manufacturing a sort of hallucinogen, or at least a pseudo-hallucinogen, because like they said in the letter, eventually the patients are going to realize they're having the same dreams. And it seems this facility was used as a front to manufacture whatever drug this is. While exploring the clinic, John will find a boarded up door. As soon as he starts to walk away, this thing throws open the door and drags John kicking and screaming down a staircase. We get a cutscene of John tied to a stretcher, and before he hears some creature getting closer. We then switch back to playing as John, now again tied to a stretcher, and we have to roll John behind cover before the demon comes back and finds him. As soon as the demon leaves, we can make our way back to the staircase, and once we get there, the cop from earlier, who probably heard all this commotion, unties us from the gurney. When John and the cop get back to the entryway of the clinic, suddenly The demon from before flies in through the window. We get an interesting sort of mini-boss here, where John has to hold the cross on the demon to slow it down while the cop shoots it. This can be very janky since the cop's AI is not the best, but eventually the demon will go down. John and the cop escape the clinic, but before the cop can ask himself any real big questions about what he just shot, or do demons exist, or what does this mean about the afterlife? There's some hippies setting his car on fire, or at least he refers to them as hippies. They're actually thralls, of course, and the cop chases them just off screen. If we follow where they went, we can see that the thralls took the cop to a back alley and murdered him. What's left of him remaining a pile of blood and bones strewn across the ground. And I guess now we know why that dead bird was there a minute ago. Now, if you're playing through the game and you're either not aware or not interested in its secret endings, then this is where you can end the first day. All you have to do is go get back in John's car, he'll drive back to his house, and then day 2 will begin. And as far as John knows, the clinic was a dead end, the thing's been shut down, and there's no information about the cult or no further information about what happened to the twins or this Malthus demon itself in the clinic. But to begin unlocking the secret ending, we venture back into the clinic. John makes his way all the way back into the clinic until he arrives at the stretcher he was once tied down on. You'll be given a prompt asking if you want to lay down on the gurney again. Of course, any reasonable person would say no, but this is John Vord we're talking about, so of course he voluntarily ties himself back on. If John, now on the stretcher, wheels himself to the pile of bodies over to the left side of the screen and waits there for some time, eventually another door will open. Something to keep in mind is all of the people on these stretchers seem to have a distinct hole carved into their face. Whatever this hole in the face is, as we've established at this point, it's definitely related to the cult. If John goes through the doorway, we're treated to the best cutscene in the entire game, as we can hear John screaming in 8-bit audio as his gurney flies down the staircase. Flies down the stair. Upon reaching the bottom, his gurney breaks, and he is now able to walk freely. He enters a room, and inside, he sees what appears to be a woman holding a baby. And upon approaching her, this scene plays out.
I'm working short with boys, Ben, Jason, Martin. Have you seen them? Who's here? I'm leaving now.
Now we're given the actual boss fight of the clinic, as babies, or at least what appears to be babies, pour out of the wall and begin to attack John. The cross will ward them off pretty quickly, but the babies will alternate between attacking John and attacking the woman. After fully covering the woman, she becomes much more powerful and effectively impervious to the cross attacks, and while they can't actually hurt John, they can slow him down. The best strategy here is to just focus on the woman and pretty much ignore the babies. The only time they become a problem is when they build up a pile of themselves and become this really fast baby mech thing. And then if that happens, that becomes your priority, but for the rest of the time, just focus on the woman. Eventually, she'll be defeated, and we are now allowed to leave the clinic. As we make our way out of the clinic's basement, we find another note.
Smooth moves, priest. But the twins are not here. Carry out the works of your god, while it is yet day. For the night cometh. Remember, Gary loves you.
So for one, she mentions that the twins belong to Gary, which is, of course, ominous. But when we ask about Gary specifically, she says, Gary is a normal human being just like you and me, which is not a thing that people feel the need to say about normal human beings. And it of course raises the question of what on earth was going on at this clinic. Because we saw the note that the pills weren't working enough to put people in these hallucinatory states of mind and an injection's needed, so there was some kind of drug being developed. But then in the basement, there's like hundreds of babies, or babies, whatever those things were. And while we maybe defeated a bunch of them, and whatever that woman was doing down there with all of the babies, but what were they even for, right? More on that later. You're not going to like where it goes, but there will be more. That would be a good motto for the channel at this point. You're not going to like where it goes, but there will be more. Now, after leaving the clinic, getting in our car and traveling home, we see a short cutscene of what looks like this big altar slash sacrifice slash, I don't know, some demon room that has a large cryptic symbol in the middle of it, when suddenly a third of that symbol disappears. If you didn't go back into the clinic and fight the mom demon baby thing down in the basement, then this cutscene wouldn't play out. That's because going back in and defeating the mother is one of the 3 steps to achieving the correct or good ending. There will be one of the secret side quests in each of the 3 days we're going to play through, and the player has to complete all of them in order to fully unlock the end game. You don't need to know what that room is yet, or what the symbol we just saw part of it disappear means. All you need to know is that we're on the right track. So now as we head into our next day, John has another dream. This dream picks up right where the previous one left off, of John's exorcism of Amy back in 1986. As Father Alred holds up his cross, he tells John to recite the exorcism. However, while John is giving the exorcism, Bob and Cindy come downstairs. Both of them are, of course, scared, and the demon inside of Amy begins to yell at them in Amy's voice. Alred tells John to get the parents out of there, so John takes the 2 of them back upstairs. After the 2 remark that that's not their daughter, John goes back downstairs to help Father Alred. However, when John arrives back downstairs, Amy is gone and Father Alred is laying across the floor. Scrawled next to him are the words, "Take it, save her." And from there, John picks up Father Alred's crucifix and is ready to make an attempt to save Amy Martin. At this moment, John once again wakes up, and we are told that it is now 2 days before the profane Sabbath. Once again, John walks to his front door, and this time we find that there are 3 letters lying on the floor for us to pick up. The first of which is another letter from Father Garcia.
John, there's an apartment building in New Haven where they may be attempting to summon Malthus. I'm not able to go there myself. It's up to you to stop their rituals. Vaya con Dios, Father Garcia.
So after the clinic, for some reason, the cult is trying to take over this apartment building, which means that's our next target. However, there are 2 letters left for us to pick up, both from someone named Lisa.
John, for now, this is the only way I can contact you. I think they're watching me. I need you to come over as soon as you can. The situation has gotten much worse. My address is 665 Orange Street, apartment 5A, New Haven, Connecticut, 06511. Thank you, Lisa. P.S. If for some reason I don't answer the door, get the spare key from my friend Tiffany.
And then this note is followed by,
I don't know if you're getting my letters or not, but I hope you'll be here soon. I really need your help. They're in the apartment. I see them all the time now. I can hear them in the darkness. I haven't slept in days. When you get here, just come straight to my place. Tiffany can't be trusted. Don't talk to my neighbors either. They won't let me leave. Lisa.
So whoever this Lisa is, she lives at the apartment building mentioned in Father Garcia's letter, and somehow she knows John. Now we know this isn't a love interest because Molly was John's love interest. Remember that whole note where she's like, I can't do this anymore, but I'll always love you? So we can assume that John and Lisa aren't a romantic relationship, but they definitely have some kind of relationship. So we leave in our car and make our way over to the apartment building. Walking to the apartment building, we can see that it's a rather large structure of several floors. We can also assume that this entire thing is infested with cult members. If as soon as we walk into the apartment building, we take a left to get to the mailboxes, we find another note lying on the ground. This note is also our first clue, if it wasn't obvious enough from, Garcia telling us the building's probably overrun, that something has gone terribly wrong.
Hello, Mr. Ward. I am sorry to have worried you. I am perfectly fine. I have not been feeling like myself lately. However, I am much better now. Please do not trouble yourself with coming to visit. I have decided to take an extended vacation in the country, so you will not find me at home. Sincerely, Lisa Pearson.
So this is clearly not Lisa, but for some reason, the cult wants us to think that it is Lisa. For whatever reason, they don't want John meddling in whatever they're doing here. It also implies that something bad's probably happened to Lisa. Also, if you continue left and try to make your way down to the basement, you'll find that the basement is pitch black. And after walking in there for a short amount of time, a thrall will come up behind John and murder him. So we probably don't want to do that. I don't know, unless you're really frustrated with John at this point for some reason. Going the other direction, we can choose to either use the elevator or the staircase to work our way between floors. And while exploring the layout of this apartment building, we can see that, yes, in fact, things aren't great here. Between the combination of creepy notes, shattered mirrors, and rooms in disrepair, it seems that the cult has infested every aspect of everyone who lives here. So, let's analyze what's so messed up about this setting. The first thing I want to mention is Lisa's friend who also lives in the apartment, Tiffany. Now, if you'll recall, Tiffany was mentioned all the way back in the letter we found from Gary over at the baby clinic. And of course, in Lisa's letter, she says that Tiffany can't be trusted. We get our first clues as to Tiffany's whereabouts in room 2A, in which we find a note written by her.
Every initiated follower knows that in order to bring about the second death, one must sacrifice 7 by passing them through the carved out of the impure vessel's face. Then shall the unspeakable reward the with the second death. Such was the fate of that whore Amy. My beloved Gary has set his sights far too low. I will surpass her.
So this sounds like an acolyte of the cult who's so in love or enamored with Gary that she's jealous that Gary has chosen Amy to set his sights on. We'll see more of Tiffany's actions here in a moment. Also, in that note, she mentioned carving out one's face, which is, again, very similar to the people with holes for faces that we've seen earlier. We're getting more hints as to the cult's practices, but we're not there yet. If you looked at all the names on the mailbox on the first floor of the apartments, then you'd be able to see that Lisa's room is room 5A. But if John goes there now, the door will be locked, meaning we need to find a key. There's also a cross line out front of her room, which I'm sure isn't anything important. But if you'll remember in that note, Lisa said that she may leave something with Tiffany. And we can see from the mailbox that Tiffany's room is room 3B. So we go to the third floor to investigate. Another clue that something not good is happening in this apartment is this note we find outside of the elevator asking us to play the elevator game. And given the participant of the game that we can see on the note, that's something we probably don't want to do, but will likely end up doing anyway. This is only half of the full elevator game guide, but for now it gives us a hint that there are several demonic forces at play. When we get to Tiffany's room, we can see that, as imagined, it's in a state of disrepair. There's blood leading behind a door and static playing loudly on the TV. After we pick up Lisa's key and begin to make our way out the door, the face of what appears to be Amy shows up on the television. Now you may initially think it's Amy because it is a girl with a hole for her face. I actually think it's Amy because the Amy shows up on the television. Now you may initially think it's Amy because it is a girl with a hole for her face that's kind of the same color that Amy looked like, that kind of light purple tone. But if you look closely, the shade is more of a pink than it is Amy's purple. As a matter of fact, the note we found on the ground earlier that was written by Tiffany is in this exact same color. And given that most of the characters in the game are color coordinated, this is probably Tiffany. So then that begs the question, why is her face also a hole? We make our way back to Lisa's room, and after unlocking the door, we can see that there is a second door in the room, this one covered in a demonic seal. There's also another note that can be found in the room as well.
If you wish to break the
So I've been trying to play Celeste, but I've been having a hard time. If you look at the top left corner where I've turned on some settings, you can see the frame time delay on the bottom part of the graphs. Those spikes shouldn't be there, and if you look at the actual gameplay, you can see the hitching, the loss of frames. It's completely unplayable for me in this current state. I kept dying all the time. So to fix this, I found that if you go into the properties of Celeste, and then change the beta build to the OpenGL version, we'll see if that does anything. For me, it's a night and day comparison. This is so much.
Yeah, fun, and...
Oh, don't mention it, Wally boy. You deserve to have a day to yourself without stressing about that green clown or yourself. You're my best bud after all.
wow. Wish I
What? You had. Doesn't that space chick have
did,
you need a
Warrior,
pound you
but now think...
still can
Wow. What is this? A party? For... For me?
Yes, dear. We've been all working hard on this party just for you.
Oh, wow, I'm not sure what to say.
Oh, you don't have to say anything now. You just need to come in and have a good time, alright? Oh, before you do, have this back first.
Oh, sweet, you found it. Thanks, Princess. Wait. This looks and feels different.
Oh, well, about that. When we found your hat, it didn't have your signature upside down L on it like it usually did. The Loomis told me that it oddly had a sticker on it over it being stitched. So I decided to make you a new one and stitch it on myself. I realized that I probably should have asked first, so I apologize for that. But I didn't want to return your hat in that condition, so I hope you don't mind.
Gotta say, that was pretty nice of you, Princess. I didn't notice that was a sticker there too, and I've been his friend for years. Be nice of you. There too.
My
Refused to.
Wait, hold up.
I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to upset you.
No, it's fine. It's fine. It's just that. Nobody has ever done something so thoughtful for me before. I don't know what to say.
There now. There is nothing else for you to say. Just let it all out.
Machine, but he's also built like Groove from Despicable Me. You guys ever notice that shit?
America. Yeah, sure, like I wasn't already having an awesome fucking day. I was dealing with artificial intelligence, now it's time to deal with organic unintelligence. What do you want, Russia? My unstoppable hypersonic intermediate range ballistic missile that I used in Ukraine. I have now started to mass produce. Look man, lie to your trolls on Twitter. Don't lie to the rest of the world. You can't mass produce anything else because you're already at production limits. Plus, you're fucking broke. Like, you hovered, a little while. Like, the ruble was right around 90 rubles to $1 American dollar for a little while, and now it just, in the last couple weeks, it tanked, and now it's like 104 rubles to $1 American dollar. It's crazy. Capitalism wins again.
Well, unfortunately for you, America, Russia has friends that they can rely on. Oh, get over yourself. I don't know what you guys are exactly planning to do. Your equipment is absolute garbage and you couldn't even beat fucking hunger. I do not know what you are talking about. We have all the food we could ever want. We have the best healthcare. We have the best electricity. We have the best internet. We have the best infrastructure. Everything in North Korea is better than everywhere else in the world.
Because their propaganda isn't even half trying most of the time. Just thought I would throw that out there. They just straight up lie because they have complete control over people.
Oh, shut up. Get over yourself. You guys are perpetually on the edge of collapse at any given time. Oh, man, Stalin put my grandpa in charge, so now I gotta make sure I hold on to the bloodline. You know what happened to Stalin's USSR? It fucking collapsed, because communism fucking sucks. Next time you run into one of those people in college who thinks they're fucking educated and starts praising about communism, just look up a picture of the Korean Peninsula at night. Which fucking side is lit up? It's like somebody did an experiment. We're gonna split this country in half and do half of it communist, half of it capitalist, and here we are, 50 years later, and one side actually is awesome.
Russia, and you're still having trouble. With your friend North Korea helping you. I am literally fighting all of NATO's combined military might by myself. But of course I don't need any help. North Korea is not here. And what you talk about, they are not able to help enough. Are we just gonna forget the fact that we're hearing preliminary reports that the Houthis have started helping you? You do not know what you are talking about, America. My fight with you is right here, in the Gulf of Aden and the Red Sea. Why would I send people up there to help out in Russia's also very just cause? You forget, man, I'm like Tyrion Lannister. Except I don't drink and know things, I spend too much on cool